Do you want to know how to avoid the pitfalls and the habits and all of the horrid things that come with being in a toxic relationship? If so, stay tuned. Hi guys, welcome to today's episode of Love Domini. Today we are going to be talking about my favourite subject, toxic relationships. Stay tuned. I wanted to talk about this topic because it is one which is particularly close to my heart. I'm very sad to say that, and that's come from a lifetime of toxic relationships that I've been in and an inability to see that, and in fact actually prioritizing the need to be loved and wanted over having a healthy relationship. And even in the last couple of months, what's been really eye-opening for me is that some of the behaviours and toxic patterns that I thought that I had overcome and I thought that I had worked through have actually shown up and shown their ugly faces in some situations where I really wish they hadn't. So what does a toxic relationship look like? Well, for me, it has looked like a need to please and a need to receive love from the other person without really thinking about how I can meet my own needs and how I can set boundaries which mean that I am loved better, and as a result, I can love better because I'm loving myself and I'm able to put things in place which prioritize me and filling me up, which mean that I can then prioritize how to love and learn to love another person. I think in a relationship context, we get so swept away by the romanticism that exists. And I've heard a lot of people talk about this, but the kind of fairy tale romance that we get sold as we grow up, right? You know, this whole Disney film thing of the princess that meets the prince and they live happily ever after. And unfortunately, that can become very true for us because we really believe that love should be easy, and that love, if it was real love, would be easy and sweep us off of our feet and give us butterflies, and we'd be sailing off into the sunset every day. And whilst I absolutely believe that real love should feel amazing, I have come to learn that real love in romantic relationships, but also friendships, family, work relationships, actually looks like really being honest and true with how you feel and being vulnerable about that, even when you don't want to. So, for example, a couple of months ago, a friend of mine, I think I'd reached out to her on a Saturday and I was like, oh, hey, hon, how you doing? She was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm in Westfields, which is like this big shopping mall in London in the UK. And I was like, oh, rather you than me. Okay, have a great time. Speak to you later. And I saw her at church the following day and I was like, oh, hey, hon, how was Westfield? She was like, yeah, it was really good. Me and Paris had a great time. And it's fine for me to say that name because we talk about it all the time. But she'd basically gone with another friend of mine. And I was like, oh, you and Paris went together. Oh, okay. And in my head, all of these alarm bells started going off. And my whole anxious attachment system was triggered and led me to believe that I had done something wrong, that they must no longer like me because they'd gone out without me, and that I was this horrible person. And I just started to get into all of that shame and all of those feelings of rejection, and really feelings that, you know, I talked about therapy and going through therapy, and I'm like, yeah, I'm working on this and I got my stuff together. And then all of a sudden, this feeling of rejection just rears its ugly head. And when it does, it's so uncontrollable for me. It so takes me to a place where I imagine that as a child, I just felt so lonely. And because I wasn't able to identify that emotion back then, it's just the feelings that I get now. So it sends me to this place of just isolation and darkness. And I feel like a little girl in a deep, dark well, and I can't get out. And in that moment, when I'm feeling so alone and so rejected and so isolated, I can't even I know that the thought processes are wrong, and I know that the patterns are wrong, and I try to speak to them, but it's like the behavior it's like the person that rears its head is so much more in control in this moment. And for me, it's very much been about identifying this attachment system that is triggered. And many of you may have heard the terminology around attachment, but a broad sort of very generalized statement about attachment theory is that each of us exist in one of three categories, and those are avoidant, secure, and anxious. And in fact, I have my one of my favorite books, but I'll link the book in the description, but it's called Attached: The Science of Adult Attachment. And I'll just read you the statements for each of those different styles, and maybe just see if you can identify yourself with any of these. So anxious. Anxious people are often preoccupied with their relationships and tend to worry about their partner's ability to love them back. Avoidant people. Avoidant people equate intimacy with a loss of independence and constantly try to minimize closeness. And secure. Secure people feel comfortable with intimacy and are usually warm and loving. So obviously we all want to be secure, right? Obviously I was like, yeah, I'm secure. I'm definitely not. I'm completely anxious. And what that means is that when my attachment system is triggered, I go into this whole spiral, and like literally the book has a flow chart of just how deep it gets in terms of where my brain goes, and where particularly my emotions go, which then, unless I catch them, lead to really negative behaviors. Okay, so I thought I'd share just a little bit of the flow chart, which is in the book. And so it's so ridiculous, but it so resonates with me, right? So this is the kind of what will happen. So a sign of a threat to my attachment system could be, oh, my boyfriend hasn't called today. Is something wrong? And then I would go to, maybe he's angry with me. I know, I'll invite him for a romantic dinner. And then does he answer or call back? And so the idea is that in my head, I've kind of thought through this rationale. I've seen a sign of threat. There's been an activation of my attachment system. Oh, maybe he's angry at me. Then I seek a partner's emotional response. And for me, this is such a this is such a toxic behavior, because this is the behavior that makes us behave in a way where we try and seek a response, an emotional response from the other person. And often people that have anxious attachment are attracted to people that have avoidant attachment. What that looks like is that often as an anxious person, we're chasing after that person whose love and approval we really want, and we're doing everything and anything we can to be noticed by them. But their style is avoidant. So they're the ones that are like, anything that feels a threat to their independence or anything that feels too intimate, they're going to try and pull back from. And so the two together just make for a really toxic mix, because the avoidant person can't hold the attachment, the person that has anxious attachment, and the two just go together and often, unfortunately, crumble. And that's definitely been my experience. And I've had many avoidant partners. So then this whole like seeking the partner's emotional response, right? So particularly if they're an avoidant, they're probably not going to give you that much of an emotional connection and intimacy anyway. And so actually when an opportunity comes up to get that, because maybe you feel as though your attachment system's been triggered in some way, so you felt some level of rejection or some level of them trying to push you away, it's an opportunity to try and seek an emotional response. So for me in particular, it could look like, I remember having an argument once with a boyfriend and throwing cushions at him. Luckily it was just cushions, not plates. But this is the thing, isn't it? Like, you know, I hate to sit here and admit this, but even then, and this is going back sort of like 7-8 years ago, even then I felt like I was a fairly successful person, you know, like career wise, I had a good job, I had great friends. But in this relationship, in this romantic context, I became this crazy woman. And it genuinely, when I look back now, I recognize that it was all of these things, all of my own trauma and unhealthy behaviors playing out, me not meeting my own needs and coming into a relationship expecting that, this person is going to fix me, I'm going to fix them, and they're going to fix me, and they're going to make me feel loved every day of my life. And that's just not realistic, is it? You know, so I remember, anyway, back to the throwing cushions at them. Yeah, wasn't plates, but it was cushions. But the only thing in my head was that we'd had this argument, and it felt as though they just weren't giving me anything. They obviously didn't want to argue and shout, and at the time, that's what I wanted to do. And so the idea of throwing stuff at them was to try and provoke a reaction and to get an emotional response, right? And then this is where it goes into really dangerous territory in a relationship with somebody, because if we don't catch ourselves at that point, or if that person doesn't message us back to say, oh yeah, no, everything's fine, have a great day, and at which point, by the way, if they did, we would completely, certainly for me, my mind would be completely settled again. I'd be perfectly fine and all would be okay. But in the case that that doesn't happen, and maybe this plays out for a few hours in the day, it is so demoralizing for me that is where my attachment system goes. And so it literally then from that point is like, oh my God, it's been 5 hours now since I left the office. Maybe he's going to leave me. Maybe he's met somebody else. I can't believe this. We're going to break up. I need to tell this person and that person. And it sounds so irrational and crazy, right? And, you know, we laugh about women being crazy and like going through these emotional roller coasters in our heads. But that is genuinely, for me as an anxious person, if my attachment system is triggered and I do not catch it, or for whatever reason I'm not able to intervene in all of this self-talk, then I go to that point so very, very quickly. And I wish that I didn't. And it upsets me so often, but I do. And the part of the reason why I want to share this is because I know I'm not the only woman that this happens to. I know that lots of women have started to reach out and ask, like, how do I know if I'm in a toxic relationship, or how do I change that, or I feel crazy, I can't believe I'm behaving like this, where does this come from? And so I guess I just wanted to share a couple of things with you that have worked for me in terms of getting to a point where I can have healthier relationships. And it is very much still a journey. Very much still a journey. Like I said, even a couple of months ago, even very, very recently, some stuff's happened and it's triggered my attachment system in a way that I thought I dealt with. And when that happens, it really is quite scary to see myself and to see the person that I become in those moments, because I really then start to identify with that being who I am. And I think this is really important to understand, that even when we go to this point of crazy, even when we're triggered to go there, we have to know that that is not who we are. And the person that we're in a relationship with can start to understand that that is not who we are, but that is what happens to us when we're triggered. And hopefully they'll be able to help as well by providing aspects of security and reassurance, and knowing that, like, oh, okay, they've texted me, I should try and text them back as soon as possible because I don't want to upset or offend them. And if you're in a secure relationship that is healthy, that is what the other person is going to want to do. When you tell them about your anxiety around this, or how it makes you feel when you don't hear back from them after a few hours, if there's somebody that says, well, that's your issues, you need to deal with your stuff, you need to, and don't get me wrong, there is definitely an aspect of us needing to take responsibility and work through this stuff. But if they are somebody that sits there and says that, then really how healthy are they Because how much are they showing up for you and your needs in a relationship? Because it's a two-way street. You're going to help show up for them and what they need and support and love them, and they need to do the same. And I just feel like sometimes we get so embarrassed to talk about this stuff with our partner because we feel so full of shame about it. And I really know and really can empathize with those feelings of shame. And there's another book that I've started reading. I could recommend you books all day long, by the way. It's what I love to do. But this book has definitely been one that has helped me to really think about my own experience of shame, and as a little girl, where that may have come from in terms of my childhood experiences of abuse, of physical beatings, of sexual abuse, and of the rejection from both my mum and my dad. And how then I've had to navigate that right the way through, really, until I was in my 30s. So anyway, this book is called Healing the Shame That Binds You. And again, I'll link it in the comments below. But there's some phenomenal stuff in this book which helps to understand how you build these systems of attachment based on the experiences you have as a child, and particularly where there's abuse or there's extreme trauma or toxic trauma in your childhood, how subconsciously these behaviors manifest. And then it's a life's work to work through these issues and this stuff. And I think I would just love to encourage as many women and girls as possible to not shy away from doing that, to not shy away from being honest about your truth and honest about the feelings of rejection, abandonment, insecurity, all of those things that come up for you when you feel triggered, not just in your attachment systems, but maybe because of another negative behavior that the other person might present. But I just would really encourage you that if you are not in a relationship where you can sit down with that other person and talk with them about this stuff, then that in itself is an unhealthy relationship, because the level of communication to enable you guys to work through this is just not there. And so it's always going to be toxic, because you're going to get upset, you're going to behave in a toxic way, and they're going to then try and respond to that toxic behavior in their own toxic way. And even worse, if they've had their own trauma that they're not working on, then the two of you are just going to go round in circles. Some of the things that I've found have been really helpful to me in terms of getting over this stuff, or certainly trying to work through this stuff. Basic things like journaling as much as possible every morning. I've also really learned that showing up for myself and being honest about this stuff, having conversations, speaking to friends, speaking to counselors, wise people that have been through this, people that are healing from their own pain, people that are in healthy relationships, that have worked through some stuff, that they're able to give levels of insight and encouragement that just remind you who you are. When you become this crazy person in these scenarios, you need people around you that remind you that that is not who you are. That is a behavior that shows up, but that does not determine who you are. Another thing has really been exercising and eating well, looking after myself, like going right back to the basics of parenting myself. So getting up, having routine in the morning, spending time with God in the morning, spending time in reflection. If you don't have a faith, just that you're spending some time with yourself, thinking about how you want to show up that day, the kind of person you want to be in your relationships, and the values that you hold. And an amazing book that has really helped me to identify those values and to think about who I want to be in this world is one of my absolute favorites. It's called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And again, I will link this one in the show notes. But this book has really enabled me to just explore, understand the fact that if I don't start to love who I am when it's just me and me, then there is no way that any other relationship in my life is going to be able to be healthy, because I need to know what I need in order that I can then articulate that to another person if I want to have an intimate and vulnerable relationship. but healthy eating and silly things like going shopping once a week and meal planning out what I'm going to eat that week, and then different days, like cooking different things based on that, having food there, you know, not just relying on takeaways or quick microwave meals, but actually cooking good food. And I love food, and I definitely will do something on the channel at some point with some of my recipes, because I absolutely love cooking and eating healthily. But that's all been part of a journey, and very much a massive journey in terms of my healthiness. But I think that health and fitness is such a big part of that, because again, it's about showing up for yourself and looking after yourself and prioritizing you and how you feel about you, you know. And that is really what our health is. Our outer health is often such a reflection of our inner health and actually how we feel about ourselves. And so if we can really start to understand that, then it's not even about exercising and go to the gym every day. It's about doing things that make us feel healthy, making healthier choices. Guys, I hope you found something useful in today's episode. Please do check out the show notes for those book recommendations. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you haven't followed me on Instagram yet, what are you doing? It's Love Domini. And also that is in the show notes if you want any more information. So much love, guys. Thank you so much for watching.